If you want to really know what's going on in the Brexit negotiations, then Michel Barnier, of course the EU's chief negotiator's latest speech, really is one you need to pay attention to. It reveals at its core the panic and concern that the European Union has of Brexit competitive advantage. And those of you that have watched previous videos and have been following these negotiations will know that the EU is absolutely obsessed with what it describes as the so-called level playing field. Essentially seeking to sign the UK up to a whole bunch of EU rules and regulations, even though we're outside of the European Union, even though we're coming, of course, to the end of the transition period at the end of the year. And you'll notice that those who say, as the EU has done many times, that there is no advantage of Brexit, of leaving the EU, they are the ones seeking to get the UK to sign up to a level playing field. It isn't the British government saying to the EU, we want a level playing field. And that shows you that Brussels really does fear the competitive advantages the UK can have outside as part of Brexit. And there are advantages that the government really has to press home. But let's look at this speech, because as I say, I think this is a critical moment in these negotiations. The cat is out of the bag, truly. The Times report, Brussels will reject a free trade agreement with Britain and trigger a no-deal end to the transition period unless Boris Johnson gives credible guarantees on subsidies and standards, Michel Barnier warned yesterday. The Times go on to say, Barnier, and this is the critical part, Barnier said government proposals would give Britain an unfair economic advantage in the steel, automobile, aviation, road haulage, farming and energy sectors. Well, wait a minute. We were told by Remainers in the EU there's no advantages, and yet the EU now in these negotiations afraid of UK gaining what they describe as unfair economic advantages. It really does expose what's going on and the context through which these negotiations are taking place. Now, just going through Barnier's speech bit by bit, he says that the UK government's position would lock out EU fishermen. Well, look at what's happened to the British fishing industry thanks to the EU. Absolutely destroyed. Coastal communities trashed. Businesses trashed. Do we really think we're going to sign up to continue that? No, this is a moment for economic resurgence and opportunity. That is the definition of taking back control. Barnier said in his speech, well, we know well the UK's argument. It wants a clean break from the EU. Full sovereignty. The freedom to set its own rules and spend its money as it wants with no constraints from Europe. For all these reasons, the UK insists it cannot commit, he said, to a level playing field or to basic safeguards for our future relationship. Well, of course not. If we want the freedom to set our own rules, we're not going to sign up to EU rules, are we? What part of that is so controversial, difficult to understand? Of course, I think they do understand it, but what they want and they fear, what they want is the UK not to do that, and they fear the British government gaining those competitive advantages over a whole raft of policy areas. Barnier also said British proposals on origins of goods would help the UK to develop its role as an assembly hub for the EU. They would allow the UK to source goods from around the world and export them with very little alteration to the EU as British goods, tariff and quota free. He says that British proposals on road transport would allow British truckers to drive on EU roads without having to comply with the same working conditions as EU drivers. He says the UK's proposal on air transport would allow British airlines to operate inside the EU without having to respect the same labour and environmental standards. He says that in the area of energy, the UK is asking to facilitate electricity trade without committing its producers to equivalent carbon pricing and state aid controls. And he says that in this area, as in others, without a common framework, as he describes it, on state aid, the UK government would be free to hand out subsidies at will. Wouldn't that be terrible? A British government free to act how it sees fit after being elected by the British people. Sounds like democracy, doesn't it? I'll repeat it again. The UK government would be free to hand out subsidies at will. What, you mean the government that the British people vote for? That should be acting in the British national interest, unconstrained, by EU rules. And I want to give you a practical example of this. This was a story that really went under the radar. I tried to highlight it a bit, but it went largely under the radar. Sky News reported it back in April. Companies face EU state aid battle to access loan scheme. Some of Britain's biggest employers face being blocked under European state aid laws from receiving government guaranteed loans intended to provide a corporate lifeline through the coronavirus pandemic. Sky News has learned that bodies representing private equity firms across Europe are mounting a frantic lobbying effort to ask Brussels to amend rules relating to the so-called undertakings in difficulty, which threaten to stop banks lending to thousands of large companies. So companies were facing a battle with EU state aid rules to access an emergency loan scheme through the coronavirus pandemic. And in May, Sky reported that the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, pushes EU over bailout rules for cash-starved firms. The CBI is pushing Brussels to relax state aid rules amid signs they're preventing bank lending, Sky News learns. Britain's most influential business group is calling on Brussels for an urgent relaxation of state aid rules amid signs that many companies remain prohibited from accessing emergency funding schemes. So, amidst a pandemic, the Confederation of British Industry is having to push the EU to relax their state aid rules. That's the position that we stand in. That is completely unacceptable. That is not what the British people voted for, is it? That we voted so that our government can be nimble, agile and responsive to the needs of the country. The times we are in, economic and otherwise, are unprecedented. And to have the Confederation of British Industry having to go to Brussels to urge them on their rules for the benefit of British business is ludicrous. And it shows you why we cannot, under any circumstances, sign up to the so-called level playing field, sign up to EU state aid rules. And from what we hear, Boris Johnson has rejected signing up to EU state aid rules. From what we hear, what's been reported, Dominic Cummings sees the huge value in not having a situation again where the Confederation of British Industry has to go begging to Brussels. And what a competitive advantage to have a British government able to do as it sees fit, frankly, on state aid. And by the way, this isn't about whether you're for or against state aid or anything like that. This is about having a government that is able to act unconstrained and then judge them and what they do at the election. It's called democracy. And it's something that's going to get a real shot in the arm if we have the nerve to walk away from the EU if they insist on this ridiculous level playing field. Now, to be fair, the sounds from the government are strong. A UK government source responding to Barnier's speech saying, Barnier's speech is a deliberate and misleading caricature of our proposals aimed at deflecting scrutiny from the EU's own positions, which are wholly unrealistic and unprecedented. It goes on to say, for our part, we have been consistently clear that we are seeking a relationship that respects our sovereignty and which has a free trade agreement at its core, similar to those the EU has already agreed with like-minded countries. When it comes down to it, guys, this negotiation is very simple. And by the way, Frosty the No Man, David Frost, the comparison and what we're hearing with Theresa May's pushovers, there is no comparison, okay? The government are holding firm in what they're saying. But of course, it's the action as the clock ticks down that really matters. Either you break free and gain Brexit competitive advantage. Either you break free and on areas like state aid, we have a British government that is able to respond to the needs of the country without people and groups and businesses in our country having to go and lobby Brussels for crumbs off the table. That has to change. That is the prize of Brexit, one of many, if we as a country and our government hold its nerve. A free trade deal, yes, but no to EU rules moving forward. And when it comes down to it, I sum it up in quite a simple way. Wouldn't it be ridiculous in any future election if whether Labour or Conservative or anyone else in their manifesto couldn't make a pledge credibly because we'd signed up to EU rules that would forbid that policy? Let me know what you think, guys. As ever, comment below. Love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this report, please, really helps me out. Click subscribe, click the bell so you do not miss the next video. Cheers, guys.